I'm Andrew Schwartz, and you're listening to The Truth of the Matter, a podcast by CSIS where we break down the top policy issues of the day and talk with the people that can help us best understand what's really going on. This is a special episode of The Truth of the Matter. We're going to do a real quick rundown with our president of our Economic Security and Technology Department here at CSIS, Navin Girishankar. Navin, President Trump has announced reciprocal tariffs on his Tariff Liberation Day, and Wall Street and economists are not reacting well. They're saying there isn't a lot of intellectual vigor behind this plan, and that the president has created a new world order overnight. Economists and business leaders are saying that it could slow our growth, even put us in a recession. They're saying that inflation could rise, prices could rise, and they're also saying that it could hurt America's employment. What's your take on this? How is this plan going to benefit Americans?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm asking the same question myself. Just to understand where we are, the president announced universal minimum 10% tariff on all countries except Canada and Mexico. And that's going to go into effect on the 5th. And on the 9th, there will be these reciprocal tariffs, which are country-specific tariffs for countries with which the U.S. has a significant bilateral trade deficit. There are also 25% tariffs on auto and auto parts and imports. Remember that as well. So you're absolutely right. Let's identify 4 things that I want to make sure that we're clear. 1, this is a tax on U.S. consumers of those products. Our consumers will be paying for that tax. And that will have an impact both on growth as well as inflation. It's stagflationary. Expect the stagflationary impact of this, which is it's going to impact growth to the downside. We're already seeing that in the impact on business and consumer spending. You will have a surprise to the upside, not a surprise, but a push to the upside in terms of inflation. Second impact of this is uncertainty. The president and the administration is implementing this tariff agenda in probably the most uncertain way you can imagine. So what is certain is the uncertainty. What is not certain is the benefits that they purport that we will get from this, which is that it will attract manufacturing investment and the reindustrialization of the U.S.
Bring more jobs back to the United States.
Correct.
Bring
All
more
that,
manufacturing back to the United States.
Right. So that's out there. Whether that happens or not depends on many, many, many other factors besides just tariffs. And the response and potential retaliation from partners, including allies. So in other words, what we're buying is a potential in the future for what is certain right now, which is the uncertainty, the volatility, which is flowing through markets and economies. 2, let's not forget the wealth destruction impacts of this. And we've seen that the equity market is in a 10% drawdown, approximately, more to come. I've talked to fund managers who say, well, listen, this is a potential for a major capital reallocation to other parts of the world from the U.S. Right? This is, if you looked at indices, it was basically some indices were upwards of 60-80% North American exposure, U.S. exposure some months ago, and now they're expecting a significant reallocation elsewhere, including potentially to emerging markets. And then finally, let's think about the impact on our alliances. There's the economic impact, and we can work through the math of this and whether it makes any sense. But there is the alliance impact or the geopolitical impact in terms of our ability to hold together alliances that benefit us in a number of ways. Now, I understand that what's driving this is a frustration, both with a perception of unfair trade practices, and there are some, but somehow that it's always something for nothing. And we don't talk about the services surplus. We don't talk about the benefits of alliances in terms of markets that open to the U.S.
And let's face it, most of our economy is in services.
Right. And so if you ask me, we're taking a really big bet with this. And the important thing is, I don't know what the movie script is. Like, to some accounts, this is just phase 1. What comes next is potentially a more ambitious attempt at a currency adjustment, meaning a a devaluation of the dollar, so that U.S. exports can become more competitive, right? Again, there's a tendency to conflate a number of things that would drive U.S. competitiveness to either currency or basically tariff rates. And I think that you've got to ask the question, is this good for the economic security of the United States? Or does it play into the hands of our biggest adversaries, China, who's also getting their share of tariffs? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, although one has to be careful about that too. You've got to play a chess game, an iterated chess game. That's what geopolitical strategy should be about. What are the
Sure.
next 5 chess moves?
And along those lines, I mean, are we driving allies like Korea and Japan into the hands of China instead of working closely with us?
We are certainly driving them away. So, for example, we're talking, you know, 25% tariffs on Korea. If you just add these numbers up, I mean, again, we'll have to look at the numbers. 34% on Taiwan, 46% on Vietnam, 20% on the EU, 26% on India. Now, these could all be 24% on Japan. These could all be negotiating tactics. Fine. But guess what? That's assuming a huge amount of leverage on the part of the US. And that's the core here. Are they assuming that we have more leverage than we have? In that case, then no matter how good a deal maker you are, you've got a problem, right? And so I would say there's that, and then there's the impact on emerging markets. A lot of these tariffs hit countries that are in emerging markets in Africa and Asia. And don't we need to get closer to them? That's where the Chinese are investing. We need them for things like critical minerals, for export markets in the future. So again, I ask the question, um, are we playing chess or are we playing checkers?
It's a
And
great
playing
question to
checkers
ask.
badly. Let me add one more thing. I put out a commentary last week in anticipation of this, and I'm sorry to say that it might be playing out. And I said there that you can't win the tech war if you're fighting a trade war, because the nature of technology value chains are global. And that means when you work through the impacts of these tariffs, and it's going to take some time to work through this. We're going to have to work through this. The impacts of them on critical and emerging technology value chains for AI, for chips, for quantum, for clean tech, for life sciences and biotech, all technologies that we need to lead. They are must-win technologies. Do these tariffs help us or hurt us in our ability to innovate, commercialize, scale, and frankly, stay ahead of the tech race?
Well,
Right
you
now,
know,
it doesn't look good.
that's a key question, and it's one that we're going to have to really look at. Along those same lines, what can the tariffs do to the United States' unmatched influence over the world's financial system, the advantages its businesses enjoy, and a reputation that attracts innovators and investors?
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right in asking that question. And listen, there were many questions that are legitimately raised about the economic order that has prevailed for the last 80 years, and I would say has benefited three and a half generations of Americans. And not universally. Some have had to pay the price of either technology or trade in terms of job loss, dislocations, no question. And the president and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party put their finger on that problem, and it needs to be addressed. The question is this the way to address it? What is the source of competitiveness, jobs, and increased wages over time? Is it this, or is it an investment in innovation, an investment in our workforce, an opening up of export markets around the world, achieving greater predictability and trustworthiness of technology markets in which we can compete? Those are the ingredients. The problem in seeking a silver bullet is that if you miss the mark, you're going to have to pay a really, really heavy price. And so that's what I would just suggest that we think about here. Listen, I spoke to some folks from the states today, from the US, the states across the country, and they are folks who are looking for trade and investment opportunities. Our states, whether it's in the heartland or rural communities or urban communities all around the country, these are the load-bearing walls of US global competitiveness. We have to ask the question, and all these technology value chains run through those, whether it's the quantum corridor in Illinois or the emerging EV battery cluster in Kokomo, Indiana, or others. Those are the people who are going to have to ask the question, are these tariffs helpful or hurtful to us? And I think that the answer right now doesn't look good. And so we really, really have to ask the question, what is the bar for economic policymaking in the United States today?
Navin, a lot to think about here. Always insightful, great analysis. Really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, check out our larger suite of CSIS podcasts. From Into Africa, The Asia Chessboard, China Power, AIDS 2020, The Trade Guys, Smart Women, Smart Power, and more. You can listen to them all on major streaming platforms like iTunes and Spotify. Visit csis.org/podcasts to see our full catalog.